standing, as they call it, and to make sure that you have accomplished what you need to do to get ready for your planets to animate. Let's just kind of start from scratch, okay? So we basically are setting up our planets to orbit our sun. I'm going to not make a sun, but I'll just use a cone. This will be the sort of like a simulate where our sun would go. So we want all these planets to animate around the sun. I'm just going to do like 3 of them for this lecture. Okay, and then let's say we have a couple of moons that we want to animate around the planet themselves. Okay, so let's just say that here we have 2 moons. Okay, how do we get all this stuff to orbit around our sun? I used a place marker here of a cone instead of having a sun. So that's where our sun is. I mean, I can kind of make a light right there and bring it up. And make it visible. Okay, so there's our sun right there. Okay, so everything's got to orbit around. I'll get rid of the cone. That sun. How do we do that? This is what we did on Friday. So what we need to do is it's really easy. You just go over to create in the menu bar up here where it says object. So you go to create object null. And then that creates a null object over here in your objects palette right there. You put your planet in the null, and then whatever your planet is named, I'll just say planet X is the name. Then you just double click on the word null and rename it planet X. Oops, completely misspelled the planet X. Okay? And when you click on planet X now and you go to your rotation tool, which we haven't really used, but you will be, you can see that it rotates around the sun now. And the reason it does that is because of the null object. The null object has an axis automatically where your sun is. So your sun is on what's called coordinate 0 or position 0. 1, 2, 3 down there where it's on 0 for X, Y, Z. Right here in position. Right there. If it wasn't on 0, 0, 0 for those 3, you could easily like just type in 0 and hit enter and it goes to 0. So your sun is at 0, so when you make a null object, the null object has an axis at 0. So when the null object rotates around, it's going to rotate from that spot, and you just put your planet in there and it will take the planet with it when it rotates around. Hopefully that explanation is enough for you. If not, you can come over here and I'd be happy to show you individually. So let's do that again. So we're going to take this next planet here and we're going to make a null object. And I haven't really named this planet, so we'll just call this planet 2. And then we'll rename the null object the same name so we know that they kind of match up. So planet 2 will be dragged into the null object named planet 2 as a child object. Okay? Following me so far? And then if I select the parent object, the null, which I've renamed, that now rotates around the sun. So I have another planet with 2 moons. That's the planet, so we'll call it planet 3. And then I have 2 moons, which we'll name, just to be unoriginal, moon 1 and moon 2. Alright. Moon 1 and moon 2 go inside of planet 3 as child objects because the planet is going to be orbiting around the sun, the moon's got to go with it. But that planet's not going to orbit around the sun right now. If I try to make it animate, it would just like spin around on itself in that position. So I go over to create and I make a null object and I put planet 3 inside the null object as a child, and then double click on it and rename the null object Planet 3. Okay, and so that's where we kind of left off. Now you should have textures on your planet, so I'll just make like a texture really quick. When you make up a texture for your planet, you go down here to create in the materials palette, and you go new material, and it appears as just a generic like gray white sphere, and you double click on that sphere, click, and that brings up this material editor window, and all you have to do is go to color and go where it says texture right here, and over to this little button across from that, these three little white dots, and you click on it, and you go get your texture that you downloaded off the internet, hopefully, and you hit yes, and then that goes on that and becomes the texture for it. When you want to put a texture on an object over here, you just click and drag and then touch the word that you want to put it on, and it goes on. So now I have everything textured. Okay. When I'm ready to animate this, which will be in a couple of days, I'm probably going to give tomorrow as a catch-up day just in case anybody was absent. But when I click on and I show you right now with the way they're rotating, that's going to orbit around the sun. Okay. Now to get the moons to work, though, this is the new stuff. Okay, because we want these moons to orbit around the planet. So as this planet over here animates around the sun, we want those moons spinning around, kind of like you see here. If you look at this one right here, this planet right here has two moons, and you see how they're orbiting around the planet as that planet orbits around the sun. I'm going back and forth so you can see it. Okay, that's called scrubbing the animation. When I go down here and I touch that little nub and I go back and forth, I'm scrubbing the animation. Alright, so let's go back to this. Alright, so now how do I get those moons to animate around this planet? Well, without explanation, it's super easy. I'll show you and then I'll give you the explanation. All you have to do is convert these two moons into advanced objects. Right now they're primitive, basic objects, so if I convert them into advanced shapes, I can do more stuff to them. And so what I'm going to do is just select them, and then go over, if you're watching, this tool right here allows you to convert it into an advanced shape. So it's pretty easy, just click on it. That's it. When you look at them now, they'll have a different icon of a little blue triangle. That means that you did it, they're in advanced shape. And what you can do is, one at a time, you go over here to this new tool called the Axes tool. I'll make it blink on and off. And that'll allow you to move the planet's center. I'd probably do it in the top view, but I'll do it right here so you can kind of see it. Allows us to move this axis over to the planet. And then I go to the other moon and I move its axis over to the planet. And what happens now is I get off the axes tool, and when they rotate, they have a new center, and they'll basically rotate from wherever I moved it to. Okay, so if I have a cube up here and I just want it to spin around, I just spin it around. But if I want it to spin it around from a different point, like, hour hands on a clock, then I convert it with this tool. It becomes a polygons cube instead of a primitive cube. And then I move the axes, these little arrows, the green and red and blue arrows, that's the axes, to a different spot. And now when it rotates from that spot instead of on its own center. Okay, so that's all you're doing here. So if we go to the actual file I was working on, let's close these. So let's say I want these two moons to rotate around this planet. If I were to just click on those moons right now as they are, they're just going to have an axis where they are, and they're just going to spin in place. I want to move that axis to the center of the planet, so that's where it spins from. So in order to do that, I just have to select my two moons and go to my conversion button up here and convert it, and then go down here to the axes tool, and one at a time, I can't do them both at the same time, drag the axes over to the planet. What's a better way of doing that than going to the top view, and you can see if you know, the center. See how I was off center by doing it that way. You can kind of like center it that way. And go to the other planet, there it has an axis on itself, where, you know, which they all do until you decide to move it or do something with it, and then you just drag that over to the planet, and now they'll spin from that point instead of where it was. You just have to remember to get off the axes tool by clicking on it, otherwise it'll probably screw you up and you'll forget that you're on it sometimes. And so now when I rotate, you can see those, when we are ready to animate those planets that have moons, the moons will rotate around the planet. And then the planet, because I put it in a null object, will orbit around the sun. So it's all ready to go to animate. That's all where you need to get. So you need to get to this point where all your planets are lined up, all your planets are inside of null objects, and then the moons are inside of the planets, and then any moon that you're going to animate, you have to animate at least two moons. You've converted the shapes. So remember this tool right there. It's called the Make Editable tool. But let's just call it converts a regular object into an advanced shape. So, and you can tell that you did it because it'll change the icons. So like a primitive basic shape has the whatever it is, a sphere, a cube, a cone as its icon. So if I were to make a bunch of primitive shapes up here, you can see cube, cone, torus, they all have their own, whatever they are, icon shape. It's different. If I take all three and I go to the conversion tool and click, they all become, they're still a torus, a cone, and a cube, but they're advanced ones that can have more stuff done to them. So like the other ones are limited, so you have to convert it so you can do more stuff to it. And why doesn't everything just come like that? Well, because they take a little bit more memory to process, so it doesn't want to slow you down and just leaves things that are primitive that you don't need to do anything to as primitives. And until you actually need to do something more advanced to them, then it gives the ability to convert it so you can do that advanced stuff. Okay. Once you've converted it into this polygon shape or polygon version of itself, you'll see the little blue triangle icon. Then you can move the axes, but not until. So let's just do it one more time. So if I have a cube and I have a torus and I have a cone, and I take them all, I cannot move their axes until I convert them. So I convert them, and then one at a time I can move their axes with the axes tool to other spots, wherever I want to move them to. And then now when I rotate them, they'll rotate from their new position. Okay. They all are still a cone, a torus, and a cube. They're just advanced versions instead of primitive, basic versions of that. Okay. And the reason that, it might, if it's confusing you, I could explain it to you again, and if you come over here after the lecture. But all 3D software works this way, whether it's Cinema or Maya or whatever, whether you're doing gaming or motion graphics for television commercials or visual effects for movies and film, CGI stuff, or if you're doing graphics for, you know, whatever, science, the medical industry, any 3D, they all are the same, the softwares, and they all do similar things. There's only two types of shapes for a 3D software. It's either a primitive, which is a basic shape, or it's a polygon, which is an advanced shape, if you want to think of it that way. So everything falls into those two categories, everything you're doing. Right now, most of this stuff these are all primitives. You know, until you see like down here where I'm working on, these are the only two polygons. Everything else is a primitive shape. So these are the only two advanced shapes. The primitive basic shapes are limited. I can't do as much to them. Polygons you can connect. It's like Legos. You can build all kinds of complex, amazing models. Primitives are just like the basic building blocks to get to that point.